This is a coolabah tree, and we're in Taroom in Queensland, and I think this is possibly the last surviving blaze tree from Ludwig Leichhardt. He blazed it LL 1844. In November of 1844, he passed through here on his way from Moreton Bay, modern day Brisbane, to Port Essington, which is just north of Darwin. Now, the reason also Ludwig Leichhardt is significant to us is that he disappears on a second expedition. Some artifacts are found in northern WA, which they mount a further expedition. The story goes in my family is that one of our ancestors embarked on an expedition with Lord Forrest to go and find Ludwig Leichhardt. So it's been part of my family history since I was a boy. But it's also important to us is we're going to launch a new series on Australian explorers. We're going to talk about the early explorers and how they expanded out of the Swan River, out of the colony at Port Jackson. And what we're going to do is we're going to take you to the places, we're going to put excerpts of their journals in there into these videos. But the most interesting part of this is we're going to create a Google map. So every explorer is going to have a Google map. In that is going to have every campsite we can identify, a copy of their journal, some photos if we've been there, and something that we can give to you and you can go and have a look at it. You might live nearby one of these sites. You may work near one of these sites. You may go on holidays near one of these sites. But you'll be able to go and say what explorer was here, what year it was, and look up their journal if it's available and see what they were doing. It's a fascinating piece of early Australian history we're going to explore with you right throughout this series. So I hope you can join us as we embark upon a fantastic experience to learn about the early Australian explorers. We thought you'd give you a little bit of a snippet into what we were going to produce and provide to you in our stories, especially when I talked about these Google Maps. Well, this is what I wanted to do. Thomas Mitchell, who was a government surveyor in 1846, starts out in Orange in New South Wales on an expedition to find a river all the way that leads all the way to the Gulf of Carpentaria. Now he gets up here. Now have a look at this map. Starts in Orange, makes his way up. All those points you see on that map are where he camped each day. And he gets up here by August of 1846. What an amazing effort. Now you can see he's not on the way to Gulf and Carpentaria. Thomas Mitchell knows this too and turns around. On his way back, he finds another river who he thinks might lead to the Gulf of Carpentaria. And that's another story, but it's worth mentioning. Now, not every explorer we were talking about will be government surveyors. Thomas Mitchell was. Other explorers will be people that just went to governors at the time, Macquarie, whoever, and said, I need to go and find some extra land. Can I do this? And he'd get the tick of approval, and off they'll go. So the whole story about the explorers and who were surveyors and technical people, botanists, geologists, is another story again. It's a fascinating part of it. But this is what I wanted to show is the Google Maps and give you a little insight. So if you look at this top farthest point, that's where we are. And you can go and find any of these points, get accessibility and have a look for yourself. But I just think this was worth mentioning because in 1846, this was a pretty impressive place to get to. Don't you think? We're at camp number 2, Mitchell's expedition to the tropics. And we're here to talk about accuracy when we're talking about mapping and going to the places the explorers visited or camped at. And the obvious question is, how do you know you got it right? Well, you don't, unless someone's left you a blaze tree. And this is Kennedy's Blaze Tree. Now, Kennedy came here twice, once with Mitchell on the expedition to the tropics, and then on a second expedition as the leader to explore the Barcoo, and in doing so left us with a blaze tree. Why is that important? Accuracy. See, we're trying to make sure we get the right places. When we find something definite like this, or a geographical feature, top of a mountain, we can reference their shrewing maps they created and their astronomical observations, lat and long they did, to make sure that we're in the right place, because there were errors. They used to do a bearing distance through the bush. There was errors with magnetic variation. There was errors with their astronomical observations through chronometer errors. Now, there's an author by the name of John Whitehead. He did a book on Evans, Oxley, and Cunningham in particular, and he goes into a lot of detail about the order of error and shows examples of how that was found and corrected. So go and find John Whitehead's books. He can cover off in much better detail than I. Now, as you can see on our map, we've placed this location as being camp number 2, and from here we can then go back to the Travis bearing distance to double check where other points were. And there are other points at Isisford and, as we said, further north. But this is the important part of creating this mapping and going to these places, is to make sure we get this right. Now, camp number 2 for Mitchell, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that in this story, because it's another story about Mitchell's expedition to the tropics. And other than to say they had themselves a nice little village here, they lived for 3 or 4 months. And I believe, if I remember rightly in the journal, they were actually fishing from the river. It's bone dry now. And then Kennedy comes back here a few years later on an expedition to explore the Barcoo. Now, if you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a comment and continue to follow us on the early explorers of Australia.